So I have just completed the East Blue Saga. Yo, what's good, it's your boy Dude Reviews, and heavy spoilers for the East Blue Saga of One Piece, basically the first 54-ish episodes, you have been warned. So at the time of this recording, I have just finished the very highly anticipated Gear 5 episode, and after watching this episode, I decided to make the decision to go back and rewatch all of One Piece. I'm not gonna lie, watching the rest of the Wano arc was a little confusing because I forgot a whole lot of things that happened in the early arc, so I needed to go back and rewatch and refresh my memories. I was a little surprised to find out that this show is really old. It came out in the 90s. It started in 1999 and the saga ended in 2001. And what do I think of this saga? I love the pacing in this arc. Oh my gosh, dude, the pacing is just so nice. I mean, when you compare the pacing of this arc compared to the recent arcs, it's night and day, dude. I feel like it's not too fast and not too slow. It's just the right amount. Although I must admit that Barate did feel a little bit sluggish sometimes, but we'll get to that later. I think from Usopp's arc all the way up until the end of this arc where they're at Log Town, that's when the show is really interesting and engaging. I really enjoyed the entire Usopp arc in Syrup Village. His really wholesome relationship with Kaya. I think Captain Kuro was the second best villain of the entire East Blue saga. How slimy and nasty he was. How he pretty much tricked Kaya and made her hate Usopp. I got pretty damn emotional when she slapped Usopp when he was trying to get her on her side and to make her believe him. I was expecting Captain Kuro to have some sort of redemption. Maybe despite him wanting to get Kaya's money and wealth, he deep down did really care for her, but no, he still cared for the money more than the girl, and he was willing to kill her, which was pretty dark, dude. Although that butler that was attacked by Captain Kuro, I thought he was dead, and I think it would have been a lot more impactful if he did die. We also get more into Usopp's backstory and past, how his mother got sick and ill and left the world, and it was pretty damn sad, dude. And it sort of made you feel a little bit angry towards his father because he kind of abandoned this kid when he was probably feeling really down in the dumps and all alone. But I do at the same time feel like this is probably why he had to leave. He probably didn't know what to do or how to be a father to Usopp, so he just left him with the village and decided to just sail the seas. I'm sure even he feels a lot of pain for what happened to his wife. We then go to the Barate arc where we meet Sanji, the cook chef. And while I didn't quite enjoy this arc as much as the previous arc, I really did like some of the battles and emotional moments, like the Zoro versus Hawkeye battle. Just the way Hawkeye sliced him up like that. Oh my gosh, man. Zoro is just on a whole nother level of awesomeness. I was also quite surprised that they mentioned other warlords in this arc, like Jinbei. I was like, oh wow, they're mentioning him so early on. But I do feel like the high point, or depending on how you look at it, the low point of this arc was Sanji's backstory, how he and Zeph were pretty much stranded on this island, and despite One Piece being this happy-go-lucky, very bright and vibrant, cartoony looking world, I like how it also shows you that it has some of those elements, but at the same time, it is quite grounded and it has a lot of real life issues. I had a huge range of emotions after watching the really happy-go-lucky We Are theme song, and then the episode is basically Sanji starving to death. It's a pretty jarring contrast between the theme song and the actual episode. How Zeph pretty much tricked Sanji into thinking that he had food, but in reality it was just jewels. And I like the whole sort of message behind that. He has all the money in the world, but he can't spend it on anything and it's worthless. I don't know, dude, that was all really intense, and just seeing his starved body, oh my gosh. That was horrifying to watch, dude. I wonder how they're going to portray that in the live action version. And Sanji, before this moment, how he used to waste food and was disgusted with his fellow chefs eating the scraps from the restaurant. Now Sanji has a sort of better appreciation for food, even if they are scraps. He will never let any food go to waste. I love how when he's about to leave with Luffy and go on his journey to find the All Blue, all of his chefs want him out, but they're all pretending, and then he just starts breaking down and crying crying, thanking Zeph, and they all break down and cry and show their love and appreciation for the dude. One Piece really knows how to pull out the heartstrings, mate. Yeah, the only thing I didn't like about the arc was the villain. He was quite bland and boring, and I wasn't really all about him. He just felt like a underdeveloped version of Smokey. Not a good villain at all. But I did like the side characters, and that one subordinate character, I found him more interesting than the villain. How he was starving, and then he betrayed Sanji by bringing the villain to his restaurant and trashing the place up. But despite all that, he still had an appreciation for Sanji and what he did for him, how Sanji fed him and saved him, and he couldn't kill him. Arlong Park is probably the best arc in the One Piece East Blue Saga. Nami's backstory is possibly the most tragic of the entire Straw Hat crew so far. Sanji's was pretty bad, but man, Nami had to watch her stepmother get shot by Arlong, and she had to serve under him for years, practically being a slave, suffering so much emotional and physical abuse. The thing with Nami is that even before this arc, I actually liked her as a character, how she was a petty thief, but you also got the sense that she had this sort of compassion for others at the same time, and you love Nami even more in this arc, and just you feel so bad for her and what she had to go through. And a scene of her stabbing her arm with that knife, trying to get rid of that tattoo, oh my gosh, I did not expect them to go that far with the violence. It was a bit too much for me, and I got a bit choked up watching it, mate. Luffy stops her, and she just tells Luffy to please help her, and she's just at the lowest points in her life so far. All of her villagers are going to meet their deaths towards Arlong, and she doesn't know what to do. She's lost all her money, all her hope and dreams are gone, and she only has Luffy and the Straw Hats to rely on. Arlong is definitely one of the most vicious, evil villains of pretty much the entire East Blue Saga. I mean, compared to the villains in the future, we will see, but for now, he is the big bad. It's a bit jarring watching certain movies nowadays and watching villains, but they seem to be more sympathetic and morally grey. Arlong is just all bad. There is just no good within him. He's just evil. He's bad to the bone. He cares for his crewmates, but that's it. He's a selfish, arrogant son of a gun, dude. So it was so satisfying watching Luffy break his nose and just tear his entire palace to smithereens, crashing and destroying Nami's slavery bedroom and declaring to Nami and the world that he and her are friends. It's such a heartwarming moment. One thing I like about Nami is that unlike Sakura, she doesn't do things that come across annoying. Slight spoilers for Naruto Shippuden, but when Naruto defeated Pain in the Pain arc, the entire village were celebrating him, and you have Sakura who's begging Naruto to pretty much save the day and all that, and she confronts him and she smacks him in the head, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? Cut the dude some slack. And she hugs him after that, which is nice, but she didn't have to hit Naruto, you know, like it was a bit uncalled for. Nami could have done the exact same. She could have hit Luffy and called him an idiot, but no, she gave him his straw hat and she gave him a high five, and I kind of like that. She respects Luffy and what he had to do, unlike a certain pink-haired girl. Ugh. I could make a whole video on Sakura, but today is about Nami, and we love Nami and her Namis. Speaking of Nami, I really do love how the entire village tricked Nami into thinking that they all hated her for abandoning her, but in reality they all knew what she was going through, and it was pretty sad and touching, you know. And then we move to Logtown, which is the last arc in the East Blue Saga. It's a pretty chilled arc, to be honest. Zoro gets his swords, he meets a girl that looks just like the girl from his past, and Luffy finally gets to see the place where Goldie Rogers was born and the place he was killed in. Very poetic in a way. This arc we get introduced to the awesome bad ass that is Smoker, the better version of Don Krieg. Don Krieg in my opinion is like a $2 Smokey. I mean, what is he doing? I mean, no, I'm not all about that character. He sucks. We get to meet Tashigi, who in my opinion is one of the better written female characters of One Piece, but I like how she's all clumsy and clueless. She reminds me of Velma in a way, how she's just losing her glasses and just can't find them anywhere. She even sounds like Velma. I wonder if it's the same voice actress. I really enjoyed the Luffy moment where he gets kidnapped by Buggy and he's about to be executed, and he realizes that he's about to die and he smiles. A part of me sort of died on the inside when he was smiling, because I felt like then and there he truly felt like he was about to die, and I kind of felt sorry for him. He wasn't going to achieve his goals or dreams and get the One Piece. I felt sad for Luffy. I also like how this entire saga started with Buggy and it's ended with Buggy. Fortunately, Fortunately, our boy Luffy is alive and well. But the biggest surprise of this arc, and probably my favorite part of this arc, was Usopp's fight with Daddy Matterson. I like how he's so scared and terrified to fight him at first, but then he discovers that Matterson met his father a couple of years ago, and how his father pretty much could have just killed him then and there, but he noticed that he had a daughter, which in my opinion is a really insufferable little brat. But Usopp's dad kept him alive just so that he can go back to his daughter. Usopp gets the strength and bravery to fight Matterson, and it was pretty good. It was a nice development for Usopp. The arc also foreshadows things of the future, like we see Dragon. But yeah, that's pretty much the entire saga. I didn't really talk about the Romance Dawn arc because it's the weakest arc in the entire story. Not much happens, it's just villain of the week. And plus, it's my least favorite arc with Luffy. I really feel like Luffy is a bit strange and he acts a little bit out of character. He isn't the Luffy we all know and love from Arlong Park onwards. I feel like he's a bit aloof in this arc. I did not like the line where he tells Kobe that, "Oh, I hate cowards like you, Kobe." I thought that was a bit extreme, and the way he was beating him up just to show to the Marines that, hey, I'm a pirate and Kobe is innocent. Yes, he did that to protect Kobe, but could he not have told Kobe before? It was a little bit, it felt a bit too harsh and cruel in my opinion. Luffy does another thing in Alabasta that I'm a little bit mixed on with a certain character. We'll get to that when we get to that Alabasta arc, but yeah, Luffy in East Blue is just very strange. He's not the Luffy that I like in the later arcs. He seems a little bit more harsh in his words and his actions in a way, but at the same time it does make him an interesting person and it does make the story interesting, I won't lie. So yeah, I enjoyed the East Blue saga. I will admit the pacing, particularly in Baratai, there were so many shots of the men in the water looking at the battle, and just Don Krieg as a character was a bit lame. I felt like he was a beta version of what Smoker was going to be like, in my opinion. But yeah, I enjoyed the arc. I like the Usopp arc, I like the Nami backstories. All the children backstory in this arc are so intense, but I'll give East Blue Saga an 8.5 out of 10, and I think I'll give it an A-. I still think the best arc is the Arlong Park in this, but I could be wrong. Tell me in the comments down below what you guys thought of the East Blue Saga arc.
2,000 years later.
So now that I've completed the Alabasta Saga, what are my thoughts and opinions on it? Spoilers for the Alabasta Saga, you have been warned. Finally finished my second watch through of the Alabasta Saga, and what do I think of this saga overall? Well, let's talk about the good first. I wasn't expecting this saga to be as short as it was. I'm guessing compared to a lot of One Piece arcs in the future, this arc is really short in comparison to a lot of those arcs. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some moments which felt a bit sluggish, but overall, I was quite impressed with the pacing of this arc. Of course, the main Alabasta arc, where they go to Alabasta, is my favorite of this entire saga. I love the way Alabasta is designed. I love some of the desert drawings and the sunsets. This is the arc where I felt like the One Piece art style really got enhanced. I really noticed the backgrounds were less faded, and there was more detail in like the buildings and detail in the sky, and the colors were nice. I also felt like the animation had some fluidity in some of the fights, particularly when Luffy and Zoro were fighting, as well as Sanji. I noticed this fluidity especially when Sanji was fighting Bon Clay. That was the first time so far in this story where I noticed fluid movements. But let's talk about the characters. This is the saga where we get introduced to Tony Chopper, and my gosh, do you feel sorry for this boy? Being abandoned by his reindeer family because he had a blue nose, then he ate the human fruit and was kicked out. I mean, that scene of his father shoving him out of the pack, a hard scene to watch. The dude couldn't fit anywhere in society. He couldn't go to the human world because he looked like a monster, and he couldn't go back to his reindeer pack because he didn't belong there. He was too much of a human. Imagine what that does to a person and their mentality, dude. And even his relationship with Dr. Hiruluk was really heartwarming. How he didn't look at him like a monster, he acknowledged Chopper's existence, and I like the bonds they had. But oh my gosh, the scene that really broke my heart watching it was when we found out that Dr. Hiruluk is dying and he's not feeling well, and Chopper reads into a medical book and he notices that if he can get this mushroom, then maybe the doctor would feel better. And the only reason why he went out to get that mushroom was because of the skull crossbones on the side of the book. But we find out from the Lady Doctor that, oh my gosh, Chopper did a bad thing and he didn't even realize because Dr. Hugh Luke didn't even tell him that the mushroom was poisonous. Oh my gosh, the look that Lady Doctor gave Chopper was so heartbreaking. I was just gutted when I first watched this scene. And I like how Chopper learns how to become more brave. The battle he had in Alabasta, really showing his bravery and coming out of his shell, was really nice to watch. Vivi, she started off as a quote-unquote villain, part of this mysterious organization, but then we find out that she just sort of infiltrated that organization as a larger scheme, as she is the princess of Alabasta. I just like her bonds with the Straw Hats. Just like a lot of people, she's quite unsure with them, particularly with Luffy, with how laid back and goofy he can sometimes be, but as time goes on, she grows an attachment to them. Speaking of Luffy, I forgot to mention that I think Luffy also had some sort of character growth, particularly with Vivi. When they first go to Drum Island, when Nami is feeling a bit sick, you have a bunch of people who are very hostile, the civilians of Drum Island, and Luffy is thinking of just punching his way through just to find the doctor, but Vivi is like, what type of pirate king are you gonna be if all you're gonna do is just fight your way to get what you want? Sometimes you gotta be humble and to make people want to help you when things are serious. I mean, they were in a pretty serious situation with Nami, and I like how Luffy learned that from Vivi. He bowed his head and even took off his straw hat. Really wholesome moments there, dude. Vivi also learns to trust the Straw Hats in trying to take down Crocodile because they want to go to the rebel army to stop them first, but Luffy's like, let's not do that, let's just go to Crocodile and stop the situation there, and they have that little fight. I remember the first time I watched this episode where Luffy punches Vivi to knock some sense out of her. I was a bit mixed on that. Luffy, you can't hit a pretty princess, dude, what are you doing? But over time, I have come to appreciate that scene for what it is, and it made Vivi realize that all she wanted to do was protect her friend. In a way, that was kind of an insult to her friends. She needs to have faith in them so they can do what they can do to save and help her in any way they can. The main plot for the Alabasta arc involving Crocodile and the rebel army was definitely the most interesting part of it. Throughout the entire arc, you're just so confused as to why the rebel army are acting this way. What is Crocodile's true intentions? Why is he seen as this hero warlord in the view of the public, but behind the scenes he is Mr. Zero and plotting to overtake Alabasta? I mean, what he does in this arc, my gosh, he's horrible, dude. He commands Bon Clay to turn into the king, and he shoots Koza in front of the civilians to make them angry towards the king and to make them want to clash against the royal army. And then, oh my gosh, the moment where you realize that the Straw Hats went through all that effort and work just to defuse the bomb, but to find out that it has a timer on and Crocodile knew about it just to play with their emotions, that was sickening, dude. He is a sick, sick character. Very horrible person. And Vivi, her breakdown, oh my gosh. The voice actress, Caitlin Glass, holy moly, did a phenomenal job. I noticed the voice acting in this arc was an improvement over the previous arcs, although I must admit that some of the middle arc with the giants was a little bit hit or miss, but it is what it is. I think the moment which was probably the most satisfying moment was Vivi's voice finally being heard towards everyone and just screaming, stop fighting, and Nami just getting really upset and telling Zoro and Sanji to just stop slacking around and to help Vivi while she's crying. It was heartbreaking, mate. I really do like how Nami was acting like the big sister for Vivi. In some moments she kept slapping her, knocking some sense into her, telling her to stop crying and all that. I think that's when Nami shined the most. I think Nami saw a little bit of her younger self in Vivi when Arlong overtook her hometown, and Nami also has some pretty damn heroic moments. I like how she and Usopp kind of bond quite a bit. Very strong bond in this arc, you know, they hang out a lot. I like the moment on the Going Merry where she and Usopp talk about them being the only two normal human beings on a boat filled with Deva fruit users. It made me realize that, you know what, I think Nami and Usopp are probably the characters I would relate to the most in this series, as they are the only ones without any extraordinary gifts or powers or whatnot. Going back to the visuals of the show, another thing I really liked was the portrayal of the Whiskey Peak arc. I like when Zoro had to fight all those pirate hunters, and just the shading and the designs, it's so gritty and intense, mate. Let's talk about the mixed aspect of the arc. Ace. It was cool seeing Ace in this arc. the first time we're seeing Ace for the first time in One Piece, but I feel like he didn't really play a key role in this arc. I thought he would be a part of the Alabasta Saga when I first watched it, but he just came to look for Blackbeard and he found out he wasn't here and he just left. I personally would have loved if Ace had stayed for the rest of this arc, helping Vivi out. Seeing more into his powers and his personality would have been cool. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the bad. Oh my gosh, I cannot stand Little Garden. Little Garden, that mini arc we had before the Drum Island arc, was so boring. I was struggling to stay awake in this arc. I don't know if it's because the battle against the Baroque works was a little bit underwhelming and really boring to watch, or if the animation and art style just wasn't up to par with the show before and after, but I don't know dude, I just wasn't feeling this arc. I was just bored stiff with it. And just those two giants having to fight one another for years and years, I'm like, just thinking about that sounds like torture to me, mate. The villain of the Drum Island arc, Whirlpool, was so infuriating to watch. Oh my gosh, I was fed up with this guy. And just what a crappy king he was. I mean, my gosh, taking away all those doctors and considering that he was the one who killed Chopper's doctor dude. Not cool, mate, not cool. But overall, the Alabasta arc was a pretty entertaining arc to watch. I was more invested in the main Alabasta arc than the Little Garden, Whiskey Peak and Drum Island arc, just because that's where the main meat and potatoes were at in terms of the writing and storytelling. Some things I found on my second watch through that I didn't notice before. I was surprised that Blackbeard made an appearance in Drum Island, and also J. Michael Tatum as Dalton was very distracting. All I could hear was Owen Smith from Attack on Titan. The Alabasta Saga gets an 8 out of 10 and it gets a B+. It's not as high as the previous arc because I think it was a little bit too long. Little Garden, oh my gosh, I could do without that arc. It was a drag to watch, mate. But let's hope that Skypia on the second watch through is as good as my first watch through.
6.5 hours later.
Heavy spoilers for this arc alone. You have been warned. So the entire Skypia Saga contains two major arcs, the Jaya arc and the Skypia arc. And honestly, this might come as a surprise, but I actually enjoyed the Jaya arc a lot more than the Skypia arc. Skypia didn't really interest me until quite later on. This was the first arc where my mind was wandering a lot. The pacing is pretty damn atrocious at points, but we'll get into that later. Let's just talk about the good of Jaya. The whole interaction of Bellamy and the Straw Hats was pretty damn intense and I wasn't expecting it. Bellamy is constantly harassing the Straw Hats, telling them that Sky Island doesn't exist, and the whole interaction with Bellamy reminds Luffy of the time that one pirate insulted Shanks when he was a kid. It was a pretty interesting development for Luffy. I think he was also reminded that, you know what, sometimes we don't have to always fight pointless fights. I feel like he learned that from Vivi in the previous arc during Drum Island, where Vivi told him to be humble when he wanted the civilians to help an army out. I think in this moment he realized that this fight is pointless, there is no meaning to it. But dude, it was hard to watch. I mean, just the scenery, like the lighting, everything was so dark. The shadows, the gloomy art style. Like the actual art style got really dark, and when it gets dark and gritty, you know things are serious. And just watching Nami watching her friends just getting absolutely obliterated by these men. It was really hard to watch, dude. I actually felt bad for Nami, her getting embarrassed by the entire bar laughing at her. It was a mortifying experience for her and I felt bad for her, but Luffy and Zoro stood their ground. They didn't lay a finger on them because it was a pointless fight, and the man revealed to be Blackbeard, acknowledging Luffy and him acknowledging that pirates' dreams will never end. I liked that whole interaction. I did want Luffy to fight Bellamy, but I understood it. But it was satisfying when he finally took him down. It was like you needed to see it because Bellamy is such an irritating, insufferable brat of a character, and the voice actor does a good job at really portraying how unlikable and condescending this dude is. And with Jaya out of the way, let's just talk about the stuff light in Skypia. Eneru is possibly one of the most disgustingly evil villains I've seen in One Piece so far. So far, up until this point, he is the most evil villain. And I like how One Piece doesn't really humanize some of these villains. Sometimes these villains are just bad because they want to be. Eneru's lust for power and domination, his ego, and just the way he just toys with his civilians, the people living in Skypia, playing on their emotions. So seeing him like fly up into the sky, wanted to conquer the moon, that scene made me laugh out loud. That scene was just so damn hilarious. Yeah, he's pretty much dead, unless his devil fruit power allows him to breathe in space. Yeah, speaking of his devil fruit powers, he possibly has one of the most terrifying powers in the show so far. The ability to control lightning and make lightning and just do what he can do. I'll be honest, I still don't quite understand how he was able to hear the civilians and hear what they're saying and talking about. I don't know if that has to do with the lightning powers, but it's kind of frightening, you know, having someone eavesdrop on your private conversations. It's kind of creepy, dude. I really enjoyed that whole backstory with Calgara and Noland, and just how they were two enemies who became friends, who became enemies again because of a misunderstanding, and how that island shot up into Skypia. A part of me was actually a little bit thankful that happened, because when Noland went back to his kingdom to tell the king about this island of gold, the greed in the king's eyes really concerned me. If Calgary and his tribe were still on the island in the Blue Sea, I'm just wondering what would have happened. Would the king have attacked the village and taken all the gold? That would have completely tainted his and Noland's friendship. And I enjoyed the final fight between Luffy and Eneru. I think this is the first time I noticed the animation really improved with the fight. Just a lot of really nice dynamic shots of Luffy using his gum abilities against Eneru, and it being so satisfying with Luffy finally hitting the bell and seeing all the civilians just hearing the sound of the bell. I really did like Kona. She had a pretty nice arc towards the end. She was a little bit forgettable and a bit too much of a background character when we were first introduced to her, but she grew and developed over time and she found her voice, convincing the villagers to leave the place. She had a lot of guts to do what she did. She even risked getting herself electrocuted. But I don't know, I kind of thought that it was a little bit too similar to Vivi's arc, with another young girl finding her voice and all that. I really do like Luffy and Nami's teamwork in charging towards Eneru's ship. Nami with the waver and Luffy with the golden thing on his arm. And I do like Eneru's ship. That was a beautiful design. But sadly, that is where we end with the positive of the Skypia Saga. The rest is just mixed to negatives. I'm not gonna lie, dude, but for the first half of Skypia, I was bored. The pacing was so slow, and some of the side villains that the Straw Hats had to fight, a lot of the fights and battles were really boring to me. They weren't badly written, I just wasn't as invested. I think this is the arc where One Piece starts to have that Toei pacing issues, where they would start a fight and then they would cut to something else, and then the episode would end with that fight, and then the next episode would begin with the fight about to begin, but then it would cut to something else, and I just wasn't feeling it, dude. And if I'm gonna be honest, dude, if it wasn't for the fact that the poneglyphs and Goldie Roger's message were a part of this saga, you could honestly skip this entire arc. It's more or less filler. It's because the entire arc is taking place in the sky. It's not in the mainland. The stuff that happens in Skypia will just stay in Skypia, and I don't feel like it's going to have any future impact for the show, except for the whole poneglyph stuff. They could have just gone to Skypia, saw the poneglyphs, and then just gone to Water 7 after this. Didn't really enjoy this arc. It just felt so isolated from the main story for One Piece in a way. But the positives were pretty good. But yeah, it was a pretty underwhelming arc. At least towards the end, it really kicked up a notch, so I was pleased with that. And with that said, Skypia gets a 6.5 out of 10, and it gets a C+. Not the best One Piece arc, possibly my least favorite so far.
A few inches later.
So, I have finally finished the Water 7 saga. And in case you haven't seen the Water 7 / Enies Lobby saga arcs, then heavy spoilers for those arcs, you have been warned. So yeah, I finally completed this saga. Definitely the longest saga so far. But what do I think of the saga so far? Well, let's talk about the good. The Water 7 arc might be my favorite arc in One Piece so far. It's definitely the best island they've been to. I love the beauty of Water 7, how the entire city has these gigantic waterfalls. It just looks like a really cool place to have a holiday, dude. I also love the whole storyline within Water 7, how the Straw Hats got blamed for Iceberg being attacked, and this whole mystery on what's been happening, what Nico Robin's up to. All that mystery just really hooked me into this arc. I think this is definitely, without a doubt, the arc where a lot of things started to change. One, let's talk about the visuals. It's the first arc we went into widescreen HD, and because of that they had to slightly retweak the character designs to make them look a little bit more appealing in that HD format, and brother, do they look good. This is definitely one of my favorite eras of the One Piece art styles. I particularly like the way Nami and Robin and Frankie are drawn in this era of One Piece, and as well as like the big upgrade with the art and animation. A lot of the characters got really intense and emotional growths, particularly Usopp, Robin, and Luffy. One of the biggest takeaways from this arc was the Luffy versus Usopp moment. My gosh, definitely without a doubt the most intense and emotional fights I've ever seen in all of One Piece. Possibly one of the most emotional moments in any anime I've seen, and it all kind of stems from a big misunderstanding in a way. I feel like this moment was always going to happen because I remember sometime after Skypia, Usopp was like freaking out over some of the villains, and I think he said something along the lines of he can't take this anymore and he doesn't know how far he can go. But you know how much Usopp cares for the Mary and how much he loves the Mary. He's the only one who saw that the Mary somehow had some sort of spirit. So I can kind of understand why some of the Straw Hat characters, especially Luffy, were a bit confused as to why Usopp is treating the Mary like it's a person. Regardless, it was intense. Usopp losing faith in Luffy, thinking that he would just abandon his crew like he would abandon the Mary. Man, that really hurt listening to him say that, and Luffy getting really emotional and riled up and triggered by Usopp's words. It's the first time I've ever seen Luffy really angry, and I think it comes from a place of him feeling frustrated that he can't help Usopp emotionally because he's just so angry. This arc really made Luffy grow as a character, how sometimes he doesn't always listen to certain characters, he likes to do things his way, and there is a bit of lack of understanding. I love the entire fight of Usopp versus Luffy, just the way the colors changed, and when there's a lot of shadow over the characters' faces, you know something serious is going to happen. It was emotional seeing them fight and Zoro being like, you've just got to bear it, because if you start to falter now, then who would we follow as a captain? I also like Zoro in this arc. He's just been the rock throughout this entire story arc, and how even after the Enies Lobby arc, he was like, yeah, Usopp did help us and he did fight alongside us to get Robin back, but he still left the Straw Hats. Despite who was in the right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Usopp challenged Luffy to a fight and he has to apologize. Even though this show can be very fun and happy-go-lucky sometimes, being a pirate is serious business, dude, especially if you have a crew that lack trust and faith in one another. If everyone is just bickering and not trusting one another, then how can they move forward? I think Usopp in this arc was just so brave. Like, I think he really grew as a person. He definitely had one of the better character growths. He's always been the coward running away, but even though he was beaten up by Frankie, he still wanted to get the money back and he still wanted to fix the Mary, and I'm not gonna lie, his determination was a little bit scary. Even Frankie looked at him like, what the heck is with this guy? It is in a way revealed that Usopp always knew the Mary was pretty much in danger and she couldn't be repaired, but Frankie was confused. Why did he still pick a fight with Luffy? And he said it's a bit complicated. We all know why. Usopp feels like the weakling. He fears that maybe Luffy would just abandon him like he did the ship. And I felt like him being angry about the Mary was more about him than the ship, which made the situation even more heartbreaking. It got to Luffy so much that he didn't even smile for like 3 to 4 episodes. It was pretty rough. And then let's go into the whole CP9 incident with Robin. And I just like the rest of the arc with CP9 and Iceberg and them trying to clear their names, their first interactions with CP9. I'm not gonna lie, CP9 are a pretty badass group of villains, but as we dive more into this arc, they become kind of sadistic and really cruel, particularly the pigeon guy, Lucci. But I don't think Lucci can even light a candle to possibly one of the most cruelest villains villains and just one of my least favorite characters of the show. I think his name was called Spander. My gosh, was this guy an absolute arsehat. He was like an anime version of Joffrey Baratheon. He is such a weakling and a scaredy cat, but because of his position of power, he just belittles and picks on anyone. Just the way he treats Robin and just him slapping her around, it really made me sick. I just couldn't stand this guy. And I have to give credit to Oda for writing such a despicable villain. Oh my gosh. And the voice actor, wow, what a slimy voice that was. The arc really made you see how brutal and corrupt and morally grey the world government is. They talk about peace and justice and they're out for the civilians, but they're just doing it for themselves. It's just so cruel as to the lengths they're willing to go. I mean, annihilating an entire island of people just because they know some of the mysteries surrounding the world. What is it about this blank history that has the government spooked? I like how not everyone in the Navy and the government are entirely corrupt. Aokiji, who saved Nika Robin as a child, he's okay. Even Garp and Kobe are pretty cool. And Helmeppo, it's just the big dogs at the top and the ones that are so warped in their position of power. I want to talk about Robin in this arc. Oh my gosh, you don't even know if she's a hero or not. You don't quite understand why she's doing this. Why did she shoot Iceberg? Why is she doing this? Why is she helping CP9? I love the whole mystery surrounding Robin. Then we find out that she's there to protect them. She made a deal with CP9 that she will go with them if the Straw Hats can live. Then you go into why she is the way she is and we dive deep into her backstory and it's just tragic, just like all the other Straw Hats. I mean, even as a kid, she was always alone. Her mom went off to sail the seas and to discover the truths of the world. Her dad was nowhere to be found. She was just living with her uncle and her adopted aunt who were just really cruel to her. She reminded me of little Harry Potter in the Dursleys' home, the way they treated Robin. The entire village kids hated her. No one really wanted to talk to her because she's part of the people of Oroha, and because she can't always go to the library with pretty much her people because she's a child, she's always on her own. But at least she was able to get through all the tough times with her friend Jaguar D Soul, who has possibly one of the most iconic laughs in all of One Piece. The Navy activate the Buster Call because they suspect that the people of Oroha know too much, and I like that moment with one of the elders of the world government who he seemed to show some sort of hesitation when he activated the Buster Call, like he didn't really want to do it but he had no choice. So I'm just wondering, what exactly is the world government and what is it that they are hiding and protecting from the world that they have to annihilate innocent people? Not even just the scholars of Oroha, but even some of the civilians who don't have anything to do with any of that. I was honestly shocked. Yeah, I didn't like the kids who were making fun of Robin and all the other people, but they were just ordinary people. Like, damn, I couldn't believe they just shot down that ship. And ever since then, Robin has just been running away from the government. The world has just looked at her like some sort of devil. She's the only one who lived, going from home to home, pirate ship to pirate ship. She couldn't even trust anyone. Every time she thought she found a new friend, they would betray her, they would send her to the government, and it was just so sad seeing this little girl growing up in this cruel world all alone. She had no friends and she just became so jaded. And you find out that the reason why she wanted to run away from the Straw Hats was because she just wanted to die. She feels like death is more bearable than her being betrayed by the Straw Hats. So sad, dude. And Luffy telling Robin, do you want to live? And Robin saying, yes, I want to live. Take me away with you. Just heartbreaking. But as well as Robin, we also have Frankie, who is the new member of the Straw Hats. At first, he's in a way their enemy because he was the one who beat up Usopp and stole their money, which led into Luffy and Usopp fighting, and Luffy never really forgave Frankie, even up until when they went to Enies lobby. He was still really mad at him. But Frankie proved himself to be a true member of the crew and he really pulled his weight. I remember being quite surprised that Frankie ended up being the shipwright for the Straw Hats. I thought thought it may be Polly. I still think I enjoyed the Water 7 arc a bit more than the Enies Lobby arc. Some of the fights were really cool, like seeing Chopper's transformation. Holy moly, that was pretty spooky and scary. Just the way he was beating up that one CP9 person. Oh my gosh. I got chills looking at Chopper's demon form. And even seeing Luffy finally defeat Lucci. And it was all pretty much thanks to Usopp, him finally showing his face to Luffy and telling him to get up and to keep fighting. He believes in him. I think Luffy needed to hear that, you know. And I think hearing that from Usopp, it really gave him all the confidence that he needed. And it sort of went back into what Sanji said to Usopp earlier on in this Enies Lobby arc, how people can do some things and people can't do other things. You just have to work on what you can do and leave the things you can't do to other people. Really great message from Sanji. But yeah, I really liked how this arc wrapped up with Luffy defeating Lucci and their names being known to the entire world. Like, it's like what Granny Kokoro said. The moment Luffy steps into Enies Lobby and told Sniper King to burn down the flag, they pretty much declared war on the world government, and now every single pirate in the Grand Line and the New World are gonna know who Monkey D. Luffy is and his crewmates. I really like the Sunny design. Yeah, seeing Usopp finally say sorry to Luffy and apologize to him and begging him to rejoin the crew. Very nice moment. It beautifully wrapped up and put a closure to their fights that they had, and it was really satisfying. You know, the entire arc was very satisfying. They got a new ship, they got both Robin and Usopp back, everyone was on good terms, they defeated CP9, they celebrated and partied. But I like how the final episode of this arc was not very upbeat and it had nothing to do with the Water 7 crew. It was all Blackbeard and Ace and their fight. I remember watching this for the first time thinking it was going to be some sort of 3 to 4 episode fight and battle, and it didn't turn out to be that way. It was just a 1 episode thing. They fight, and the narrator in the end says the reason why we're seeing this fight isn't because we need to see a Blackbeard versus Ace battle, but because this particular battle will cause a huge chain reaction that will change the world forever. And let's talk about the mixed to negatives. And I must admit, I didn't really like the pacing of some of the battles in Enies Lobby. It did drag on for a bit. We kept cutting back and forth to Frankie's battle, to Sanji's battle, to Nami's battle. It was a little bit annoying, and I wish we just sort of dealt with the fight and then just moved on. Another negative that I have, and it's more of a nitpick, it's a bit funny how Granny Kokoro, Chimney, and that rabbit, they just are the only characters that don't feel like they're part of the same universe. Yes, they still have the wacky One Piece designs of really like comedic characters, but even in just the way they're written and the voice actresses of them, they just sound like they were just ripped out of a Ghibli movie. Every time we cut back to them, I felt like I was watching a different show. I was like, what am I watching? Who is this child with this rabbit? Mate, I don't even know. I just found it to be really bizarre and just a bit bonkers. It's a nitpick. I like the characters, but they just felt a little out of place in some of the episodes. I also wish the Foxy Pirates crew arc was a little bit shorter. I felt like it went on for a little bit too long. That could have been a 4 episode arc and we would have been fine, but it went on for so long and it honestly felt like filler even though it was canon. It was cool seeing the Straw Hats relax and just have some fun and games, but it just went on for a bit too long, mate. But Afro Luffy, you cannot deny the Afro. How can anyone deny the greatness of the Afro? Of course Luffy won that fight. But that's pretty much all I have to say with this arc. I just find it mental that the Water 7 arc started in 2004 and ended in 2007. It just made me realize how old this arc and this show is. I mean, 2005, where was I back then? I was a little kid. I think the art and animation have really aged well. It doesn't look dated, and I think because they went digital and widescreen HD, it helped. It honestly looks like a modern anime you'd watch today, and that's the beauty of 2D animation. It never ages. But those are my thoughts and opinions for the Water 7 Saga. I'll give the Water 7 Saga overall an 8.5 out of 10 and an A. But tell me in the comments down below what you guys thought of this saga. Did you like it? Did you hate it?
8 hours later.
And let's just go straight in and talk about the good of the arc. I really love the backgrounds of this arc. I love how spooky and creepy and sinister everything looks. The purples and blacks really complement one another. The way everything is designed and drawn. When we first go into Thriller Bark, it looks so creepy and spooky and mysterious. And the way the Straw Hats walk in and just sort of investigate everything, like when Nami and Usopp and Chopper walk in for the first time and one Thriller Bark member creeping in on Nami, it feels like some sort of Scooby-Doo episode. It's very Scooby-Doo-ish in its vibe and tone, and because of that, it made me really appreciate and love the arc overall. Of course, this is the arc where we get introduced to Brook, the singing skeleton man, and my gosh, you love this guy. Literally from the moment you first meet him, he just wants to join Luffy's crew and Luffy's alright with that literally immediately. Yeah, I really like that, and his backstory melts your heart. It's really tragic, and it was surprising that he was part of the pirate group that met Laboon and left him there. Just seeing that whole flashback of him with his crew and how happy-go-lucky they all were and how they all dreamed for adventures and living the life of a pirate. It reminds me of how the Straw Hats go about with things, you know? But this time, things don't go the way they want it to go. The captain gets ill and some of his crew members and him all perish. Yeah, things keep going from bad to worse. His pirate group are defeated by a mysterious pirate ship and they are all murdered with poisonous spears, and I don't know how and where Brook got it, but he got the human fruit, and even though he did die, he did reincarnate back into a human, so he has a second life, which is kind of cool. It was so touching that the last thing they did was all record a song for Laboon. I like how none of the pirates regretted anything. They didn't regret their life, but they all regretted not seeing Laboon one last time. It was sad, dude. Them all singing the Binks Sake song for one last time while they're all dying one by one is just heartbreaking. It reminded me of the moment in Titanic where you have the men playing that violin song while the ship sinks. It's really sad, dude. I also like how Usopp in this arc is a lot braver than he used to be. Of course, you do see that bravery really shine through in Water 7 and Ennie's lobby, but back then he was Sniper King and now he is 100% Usopp, and I love it. I like seeing how brave he was, how he was the only one who was able to survive the powers of Perona. That entire fight with him and Perona was possibly one of the funniest fights I've ever seen. How he whips out this gigantic hammer and he tricks her. I'm not gonna lie, he tricked me as well. I thought at first, the first time I watched this episode, that it really was a hammer, but then I realized it's a balloon. But Perona doesn't know that, and it's just so hilarious seeing her freaking out over it and just passing out. And another moment that I really liked, which was pretty hard to watch as well, was when Kuma, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, makes an appearance and he takes all of Luffy's pain and puts it into a bubble and tells Zoro that if he can absorb all of that pain, then he will let his crewmates go. My gosh, this man is a real friend. He is super loyal to Luffy and he has so much faith in him. I love how Sanji was also trying to be the hero and also take on Luffy's pain, but Zoro was like, nope, I'll do it. And it makes sense for Zoro to be the one to do it. But I like how much Sanji cared and worried for Zoro after this moment. It was pretty touching. The villains of this arc are possibly one of the weirdest ones I've seen so far. Gecko Moria, Dr. Hodback. I mean, the laughs, oh my gosh, the laughs are just out of this world, bonkers, and I'm a bit mixed on them. It's funny the first couple of times, but then after a while it's a little annoying. I love how this arc basically showed us how you shouldn't really meet your heroes because you may end up being disappointed, just like Tony Chopper when he met Dr. Hodback. He was a huge fan of his, but then the more he got to know him and the way he treats Sindri, who was this zombie that Dr. Hodback stole the body of when the real Sindri died in an accident, and now he uses her as a slave. I mean, poor Chopper was just completely heartbroken by all this, and his lack of empathy when it comes to human life is just sickening to watch. Don't like the guy. Oars was a pretty silly, goofy character as well, yet at the same time he was threatening and really dangerous if you messed with him. He has Luffy Luffy's shadow, so he sort of has his traits and personality, and it's kind of hilarious seeing this gigantic version of Luffy with really terrifying powers, just stumbling and fumbling around. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the bad of the arc. And surprisingly enough, when it comes to the bad, I don't quite have a whole lot to say for bad. I feel like just like the previous arcs, this arc was unique and very engaging in its own special way. I appreciated how short the arc was compared to Enies Lobby. It just got straight to the point and we were already finished by the time I realized. Although I must admit that I don't feel like the Straw Hats really got any development apart from Zoro, Usopp and Brook. The Straw Hats didn't quite get any major developments. They were all more or less the same from the previous arc. I will admit I do find Gekomori's design to be very unsettling. It's not bad, it's not a badly drawn design, it's just really unsettling and creepy to look at. And I must admit that if you were to take this entire arc out and just have the stuff with Kuma in, it doesn't really change anything when it comes to the story. I mean, apart from getting Brook's shadow back and the rest of the Straw Hat shadow back, they could have just skipped the arc. It felt like, despite it being a canon arc like Skypia, you could have skipped over it and gone straight to the next arc. But personally, I really liked it. It was a really fun arc to watch with a lot of really funny gags. So with that out of the way, I'll give this arc a 8 out of 10, and I think I'll give it a B+. I think overall, I preferred the Water 7 arc and part of the Enies Lobby arc, but Enies Lobby was just a bit too sluggish and the pacing was a bit slow in that arc. But this arc, the pacing wasn't too bad, so it gets bonus points from me.
The following Thursday.
The Sabody arc is an arc that really plays on one's emotions, and in case you haven't seen this arc, then some spoilers for the entire arc, you have been warned. The Straw Hats' next destination is to go to Fishman Island. After that was pretty much the next place after they left Water 7, but they got trapped onto Thriller Bark, and now that they've escaped Thriller Bark, it's off to Fishman Island, which means going through this place, and this place isn't what it seems to be. On the outside is this beautiful place with a lot of really nice colors. It's so colorful and vibrant. I love the bubbles just sort of floating across the place. You have a beautiful theme park. It's just a magnificent island. It's my second favorite looking island after Water 7, but despite how pretty it all looks, it's not what it seems to be. It's also the place where a bunch of world nobles go to auctions where they buy slaves, and it's a pretty disgusting place. It's really sickening to watch, but it makes for a really engaging story. You can make an entire subplot on the slavery and what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, there must be a lot of stories to tell, especially with certain characters that we're going to meet in the next arc. But these world nobles are absolutely disgusting people. They are so detached from reality and the real world that they don't even have any sympathy for other humans. They live in their own little bubble, pun intended, and only care about the people in their noble families. Just a horrible bunch of people that do deserve to be punched in the face. But no matter what people say to them or do to them, they get their own ways, because if there ever comes a point where the slaves escape, then the color explodes and they die. If someone attacks them, then they basically call an entire fleet of navy admirals to them. Very insane. But the only reason why these people are important is because they are the descendants of the original people who formed the world government, which is some interesting backstory and lore. But this is the arc where we truly see how the fishermen people and mermaids are truly treated in this place. There's a lot of discrimination and hate and fear when it comes to them, and people just don't like the fishermen. It's really sad, and it sort of does correlate to our real world when it comes to that. So when Luffy's new mermaid friend gets kidnapped, and after one of the noble people attacks Hachi, Luffy gets so mad and he attacks the world nobles. He punches him in the face despite Hachi telling him over and over again not to assault them, but Luffy can't help it. He's Luffy and he attacks him, and my gosh, the animation of him punching that world noble was unexpectedly insane to look at. It was really beautiful. It's also the arc where we finally get to be introduced to Law and Captain Kidd, who will pretty much have more of a role later on in the story. It's cool seeing them. I forgot how early on they appeared in the story, and I love the dynamic of the three of them. I feel like Luffy and Kidd in particular are very similar. They're very short-tempered people and they're very hot-headed and they really clash with one another, which makes for a lot of comedic gags. And speaking of comedic gags, the entire arc starts off with the Straw Hats meeting the flying fish riders, and their main captain has the same bounty face as Sanji, and he has a pretty sad but hilarious backstory. In terms of characters that got some pretty big development in the Straw Hat Pirates, I feel like Nami and Luffy both got development. With Hachi returning, he was a notorious member of the Arlong Pirates, and he was there when Nami was at her lowest point growing up in the Arlong crew, and him being there, you would have expected Nami to be a lot more unforgiving, but after everything she's been through and seen, she's very forgiving of Hachi. She hasn't forgiven him entirely, but she can let bygones be bygones. And I'm like wondering how they're gonna do this in the live action, because I feel like Emily Rude's version of Nami is a little bit more unforgiving when it comes to these certain things. She's a bit more grounded in reality, and I'm wondering how she would respond to Hachi when the live action eventually gets to this arc, if it does, and to Luffy as well. I mean, he has fought many strong people before and he's always come out on top, but this time he wasn't able to win, and he even admitted defeat and he told his crew to run away and to try and figure a plan, and he lost all of them. It was sad seeing him break down and him feeling like he failed them. Very sad, very touching moment, dude. In terms of the bad of the arc, I don't really have anything bad to say with this arc. It was pretty good. I don't quite have anything negative to say, apart from the fact that that entire arc with Sanji meeting Duval, who had the same face as him, did feel a little fillerish, but it did reintroduce us to Hachi, and Duval's backstory was pretty sad, having to run away from the Marines after his face was used for Sanji's bounty. I mean, man, to be accused for a crime he didn't commit must have been pretty damn tough on him, you know? Even though the dude wasn't a really nice person, he wasn't that extreme when it came to committing crimes, and I kind of felt pity on him. Yes, the action animation in this arc really enhanced, especially their battle against Kuma. But yeah, I don't have anything negative to say with this arc. It was pretty well done and very sad ending as well. I think I'll give it a 9 out of 10, and I think I'll give it an A. I liked it a lot.
Much later.
And in case you haven't seen the Summit War Saga, which consists of the Amazon Lily arc, the Impel Down arc, and the Marineford arc, then heavy spoilers, you have been warned. My gosh, there's a lot more to like with this arc / saga than the previous ones, and yeah, if we're talking about sagas, this has got to be my favorite One Piece saga out of all of them so far. So according to Wikipedia, the Summit arc actually began with the Sabody arc, but I consider that to be separate from the War Summit. The War Summit for me really begins with Amazon Lily. So let's talk about the good of this arc. It was a needed arc and a really nice contrast compared to the really dramatic end of the Straw Hats all going their separate ways. And it began with Luffy being in this jungle all alone, and it really made you realize immediately that Luffy is useless without his crewmates. I never realized how Luffy needed his crewmates more than they needed him, and we really do dive deep into Luffy as a person in this arc. Luffy's always this dude who just gets himself into all this chaotic stuff and drama, but for the first time we truly get to dive more into Luffy's heart in this saga. But Amazon Lily, it's pretty nice. It's a nice arc. I like all the characters. I like how short it is as well. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Of course, the main focus of this arc is Bora Hancock, and she's a pretty damn ruthless warlord. Because of her beauty on the outside, you think that she would probably have a heart of gold, but I think there was a cat or a dog that was walking when she was arriving at her island, and she kicked the poor beast flying into the air, and I was like, my gosh, this lady is a maniac. Bora Hancock has this dislike towards men, particularly toxic masculinity. She's very put off by them, and that's why she has her entire island of only women. But Luffy comes into the mix and everything changes. At first, she treats him like every other man, but Luffy isn't quite like every other man. He isn't so infatuated with her, and so he isn't flustered when he's around her. He's able to be very upfront and honest about how he truly feels, and I feel like that's what really gets Bora Hancock into falling in love with the dude, especially seeing how Luffy isn't like all the other men and pirates that she's met in her past. I mean, seeing her backstory and how she was imprisoned and seeing all the dark stuff she's seen over the years, it's no wonder why she has a grudge against men. There's a moment where Bora Bull Hancock gives Luffy a choice. You can get a boat and go find your friends, or you can tell me to undo the stone curse on her warrior sisters and let them live, but Luffy will have to remain on the island, and Luffy immediately agrees to just letting the sisters go, which shocks her and everyone else, and it shows Bull Hancock that, you know, Luffy's a nice guy and he's got a heart of gold. All the romantic scenes and gags with Luffy and Bull Hancock is so funny. I like how she sees him in this very romantic light and she's just so damn mad over heels with him. I think it's the first time in the One Piece series where we actually see some sort of romance, but it's funny how Luffy doesn't seem to care about Bull Hancock in the way that she does for him. This arc was really funny. There was a lot of really funny gags with Luffy being naked in front of all the Amazon Lily girls, and they were just so confused by Luffy's body and him calling his privates the grand jewels. It was pretty damn funny. I was cracking up throughout that entire sequence, and I think we needed that because the next two arcs get a little bit serious. Impel Down arc is where things really start to get intense, but the thing I really liked about the Impel Down arc was Luffy is all alone. He's on a new mission. He has to save his bro from being executed. He doesn't have his crewmates, and he's in a prison full of really vicious pirates and criminals. And you see him working alongside some of his former enemies like Buggy the Clown, Mr. Free and Crocodile, and it was this weird ragtag team of characters that I never in a million years would have expected to all work together, but here we are. This arc truly did redeem Buggy the Clown. It made him competent and he became really useful, and he was a true friend. He was a bit of a jerk to Luffy in the past, but I really liked how he was eventually willing to help Luffy, and that's all because of Bon Clay. Bon Clay, from the moment he sees Luffy in the prison, is so happy to see him, and their friendship is just so underrated, so lovely and so warm. It's possibly one of the sweetest friendships I've ever seen in the show, and Bon Clay throughout this entire arc is just an absolute G. He is a wonderful person to Luffy, a wonderful person. Even Luffy wasn't expecting his kindness and his usefulness. I mean, the dude had to freaking drag Luffy's body through the cold. He stayed up screaming Luffy to get better, and he even risked his own freedom just to get Luffy and the gang out of the prison. I mean, this dude is an honorary Straw Hat in my eyes. Along the way, Luffy meets other characters like Ivanka, who has possibly one of the wackiest character designs, but their power is very interesting, and I have a lot of theories regarding her and Crocodile. There was a scene in Impel Down when she and Crocodile came face to face, and judging from their conversation, it looks like the two of them have met in the past, and the way the Crocodile seemed really annoyed with her and the way Ivanka looked down on him shows us that she's known him since he was a kid. And I had this theory in my head. Was Crocodile originally a girl, but Ivanka turned him into a boy? Just the way she seemed so carefree and confident around him, like she knew a dark secret that the rest didn't. Even Crocodile was more or less begging her not to reveal that secret, and I think that is the secret. Crocodile was originally a woman. The only thing I didn't really like about this arc was the character with the poison fruit, and how he seemed to be the butt of the joke, no pun intended. Like, for a lot of scenes, he has this poison fruit that causes very bad bowels for him, and honestly I felt sorry for the dude, but people just kept making fun of him and picking on him for that. I didn't like that. It's definitely without a doubt the worst devil fruit power to obtain, and oh my gosh, ugh. Poor guy. Also, the whole fight between him and Luffy was good, but it did drag on for a bit. I think it could have been done in an episode, but they like to drag on these battles. But going back to the pro, I like the different floors of Impel Down. It's all very different. You have like a place where it's extremely hot, a place where it's extremely cold. As they said, it's like hell on earth. It's an awful place to live. It's an unnecessarily brutal prison. I mean, having the sea prison stones is enough to keep these guys down. Why do the Navy want to completely dehumanize these people? It's a little sickening, and it really shows us the dark side of the Navy, you know. On the outside, they are shown to be loyal and just and all that jazz. I mean, the stuff with Robin was one thing, but man. And this is where we come to the main arc, possibly the best arc in One Piece so so far, Marineford, and it's pretty much the Avengers Infinity War of One Piece, where all these big characters who we've seen being teased in the past, these big dudes, these big shots, all come together at this one place. It's wild. Not only do you have Luffy and his previous enemies like Crocodile and Buggy the Clown, Mr. One, but you also have some of the Navy dudes and all the 7 warlords here, and eventually you get Shanks. You have 2 emperors in this fight. It's ridiculous, mate. But this entire arc is pretty much all about Ace, and yeah, we find a very shocking reveal. He is the son of Goldie Rogers. I don't think I can truly describe how shocked I was by that reveal. I think because Luffy said that they're brothers, and I just thought, oh, they're the sons of Dragon. But I remember at the back of my head I was a bit confused as to why Ace was called Portuguese D instead of Monkey D Ace, and I like how they actually foreshadow numerous times that Ace isn't the blood brother of Luffy. Like when Garp was talking to him in the cell, I think Ace mentioned their fathers when he was talking about him and Luffy. But yeah, I was very shocked by this. He was the son of the king of the pirates. Big reveal, big twist. I was blown away by that. And it really made you feel sorry for Ace. We get his backstory and see how he truly lived his life as a child, being the son of Goldie Rogers. Although people don't know that he is the son of him, that's kept a secret. Ace as a child, you see scenes of him walking through towns and people talking a lot of trash about Rogers. I mean, Roger is a notorious pirate, and whether you like or hate pirates, to the normal civilian, they're seen as a threat. They're seen as these scary monsters that wreak havoc wherever they go, and Roger was the king of them, so of course his name was thrown through the mud and people were slacking him off, but people also hated and feared him as well, and Ace was very paranoid with what people would think if Rogers had a son, and no one seemed to like that idea of Roger having a son, and Ace got mad about that, and he felt like he didn't deserve to be born into the world. I kind of understand why we had Ace's backstory after his death. Ace as a child, I'm not going to lie, is a pretty damn unlikable character, and I think for me this is definitely without a doubt one of the more mixed to negatives I have with this arc is the arrangements of the flashback. I think the flashbacks should have been before his execution, but at the same time I feel like people would have sort of struggled to like Ace. The dude was kind of a bully to Luffy to begin with. He literally walked away from him, he left him to die at some point, he didn't care about him. It was really Sabo that made Ace realize that he had to be a decent older brother to Luffy. The only person he liked was Sabo, that was his only friend, but apart from that he didn't really care for anyone, and he was very cold to any newbie, and Luffy was the annoying little brother that he had to take care of. And the whole dynamic between Luffy, Sabo and Ace reminded me of Anakin, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon from the Phantom Menace. How Obi-Wan doesn't really like Anakin, or he doesn't seem to acknowledge him, but Qui-Gon is like, oh, Anakin's a good boy, you must take care of him, you must train him, and Obi-Wan only acknowledges Anakin after Qui-Gon dies, and after Qui-Gon more or less begs him to look after him, and he feels like he has to. It's kind of the same thing with Ace. Like, Ace had to step up as a big brother after Sabo's death, but I think you do see him start to care for Luffy when Luffy refuses to rat out Ace and Sabo's whereabouts when it came to the money, and that scene was really hard to watch. That entire scene of Luffy being beaten up by that pirate, it shocked me, dude. I was pretty damn shocked by all that. Seeing a child being beaten up like that and just seeing the blood go everywhere, I felt sick watching it, dude. But it shows us that, you know, this world of One Piece with all the bright colors and wacky animation, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of darkness and grittiness and just all that bad stuff. The entire flashback was really cool. We see Sabo and he is a noble. These guys, the noble people, they're just absolutely disgusting to watch on screen. I mean, the celestial dragons and anyone who's of a higher class are just scummy people. I think the nail in the coffin for Sabo was definitely finding out that all the nobles knew that they were going to burn down Grey Terminal with all those people there, but they didn't care. They didn't want to do anything about it, and Sabo just felt sick to his stomach. There's a shot where you see a little girl talking to her father about why those people have to die in Great Terminal, and the father's telling them that they're not humans, they're below us. And it just shows you that truly how children are influenced by their elders and the people they grew up with. All these nasty, narcissistic people in the higher ups of the world grew up in a world where they knew people that treated other people really badly, and it was all they ever knew. Of course, when I watched this, I felt like, yeah, Saba didn't die when the Celestial Dragon shot him. You don't see the body, you just see the hat. But the Marine next to the Celestial Dragon that shot down Saba's boat was a little bit disturbed by it, showing us that even the Marines who served them don't really agree with their doings. But I think the moments where Ace truly cares for Luffy is when sometime after Sabo dies, Luffy and Ace are training in the woods and he gets seriously injured, and then Ace starts to panic and he starts crying about it, realizing that he can't do everything on his own, that he needs other people to help him out. And it humbles Ace, and it truly was a key character defining moment for Ace, him learning to be humble and him wanting to be a better person and to be more kind, which sort of explains why he's so nice. Like in Alabasta, when Nami and Vivi were mentioning how nice and elegant he was compared to Luffy, when in the past it was more or less the opposite. But going back to the main battle of Marineford, it's just all chaos, it's just intense. Kobe has a awesome moment where even he stands up to the Marines. He wants to stop all the chaos and the carnage. I think he stands up to Aikiji, the man who killed Ace. He just feels like the Marines won. There's no need to fight more. They have to stop. And I like how Kobe found his voice and he grew up hair and all that, and Shanks comes out of nowhere, and yeah, like even the Navy dudes know that when Shanks is here, that they know when they're beat. Even Sengoku, who throughout this entire arc is just absolutely anti-pirate. He hates pirates, he hates everything they represent, but when Shanks came, even he sort of was like, yeah, let's not fight this guy. Sengoku throughout this arc has just been very loud and noisy and very we hate pirates. Sengoku is a very fascinating character. On one hand, he's shown to be a Navy supporter and he hates pirates, but there are characters like Shanks and Whitebeard that he respects. Seeing how Ace felt so grateful that Whitebeard and Luffy came to rescue him, and him feeling like he didn't deserve it, but in the end he accepted their offer of saving him. That shot of Luffy rescuing Ace and freeing him from the chains, the animation was just so beautiful, the art was shiny, and it was a satisfying moment. You felt at that point that, yeah, they did it. They got Ace, but man, I felt a little bit mixed when Ace stood up to Akainu. They could have more or less escaped. They could have easily have gotten out, but Ace refused to run away. At that point, I was confused. Why doesn't Ace want to run away? Why is he confronting him? He doesn't need to. But that's because he stood up for what was right. He didn't want to walk away from someone who was absolutely disgracing Whitebeard's name. And you see in the flashback that that's who Ace was. He never liked to run away, he liked to stand his ground, and man, I was just gutted just seeing Ace run in front of Luffy and protecting him, and he just dies in Luffy's arms, and Luffy is just in denial about all this. He thinks that Ace can still make it, and it's just horrible, dude. I just, the whole scene was just emotional. It was just too sad to watch. Even thinking about it now, it's possibly one of the saddest anime deaths I've ever seen. Oh boy, what a hard scene to watch. And I felt bad for Whitebeard and all the Whitebeard pirates. They just, damn. It all felt like it was all for nothing in the end. They lost so many people, but they did everything they could to protect Luffy. I like how Whitebeard lets his crewmates call him father, as they are all more or less abandoned by the people that were closest to them, and they felt like they never belonged anywhere. But you have that flashback of Whitebeard telling one of his crewmates that all he wanted was a family, and I like how he brought Ace under his wing. But after all that chaos, Blackbeard shows up, and my gosh, Blackbeard is a very ruthless character. Came here for one thing, and it was to steal Whitebeard's powers. Ruthless villain. I mean, this dude was on a ship with Whitebeard. He was a son to him and killed his own shipmate just to get a Devil Fruit's power, and he did this all part of his plan to lure Ace to confront him and then to take Ace to the government, and for Whitebeard to come and be killed and for him to steal his power, or for him to be the emperor. My gosh, this dude's extra. But I want to know more about Blackbeard. We only see a little bit of his past, but I want to know why he's the way he is, or if he's just bad for being bad. Monkey D. Garp also has an emotional moment where he sits down with Ace and he hates pirates just like all the other Navy admirals, but when it comes to family, it's different, and he's so conflicted on what he should do. He has to be a Navy, show to everyone that he is the dude who, you know, doesn't forgive pirates for what he does, but Ace is like a son to him, or a grandson to him. He's known him since he was a baby. He's seen him and Luffy grow up in front of his eyes, and it's hard on him. And when Akainu killed Ace in front of him, and you have Sengoku running after him, and Sengoku's just trying to stop him, and Garp is like, thanks for holding me down, because if he didn't, I probably would have gone and killed him. Like, damn, dude, just damn. And when he goes back to the hometown of Ace and Luffy, and the lady who was looking after Ace and Luffy just punches Garp, and she's just so frustrated with him on why she had to raise him for things to turn out so horribly. Like, I felt bad for her, and Garp didn't fight back. He felt like he deserved it. And seeing all the villagers in Luffy's hometown all just being so sad with what happened to Ace, it was sad, you know. I actually felt bad for Garp. It must have felt like crap at that moment, and of course I felt bad for Luffy and how he was just distraught and he felt like he couldn't do anything. He felt weak, but man, Jinbei was a real G in this moment. How he didn't let Luffy be on his own. He had to be by his side because he knew that Luffy had friends. Ace told him he met them in Alabasta, and he knew that Luffy had to go to his friends because they need him just as much as he needs them. The voice acting in this entire arc was phenomenal. Just so many emotional moments, and I was just so invested throughout. I like how all the Straw Hats come to this realization that Luffy has done so much for them, but what have they done for him? And they all feel like they have to all train hard. Zoro even puts aside his pride and he begs Mihawk to train him because he's thinking about Luffy and he wants to be of service to him. Man, Luffy's got a bunch of good friends. You can't help but feel envious of that. So yeah, the Straw Hats are all training, they're doing their thing, and we're off to the new world. That's pretty much the entire arc. Some things I've noticed with this arc: the art style started to change in this arc. I noticed that Robin's skin started to get lighter and Nami's face looked a bit different. A lot of the character design started to look very different to how they used to look in the previous arcs, and I think that's because they changed the main character designer. I did prefer the previous art style when it came to the way the faces were drawn, but knowing what One Piece is going to look like in the future, I am okay with it for now. Also, ever since the beginning of Impel Down, I noticed that the frame rate seemed to change. It seemed like it was at 60 frames sometimes because the panning looked super smooth sometimes, like very buttery smooth. But yeah, that is the Summit War Saga, my favorite saga so far. Got amazing voice acting, the action gets intense, and the character writing is just top notch here. It was an intense emotional roller coaster of an arc and it flew by. That was 132 episodes of absolute greatness right there, and I'm definitely going to give the War Summit Arc Saga a 10 out of 10 and an A star. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the big time skip. But tell me in the comments down below what you guys thought of the War Summit Arc. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Like for more? Boy did the view, signing up.